So, you've just started a new piece on the piano. You're super excited. Maybe it's something you've always wanted to play for ages, but then just a few days in, it feels like your progress is ridiculously slow and you start wondering, why is this so hard? Honestly, that can happen to anyone even after many years of playing. In this video, I'm going to share 3 things I teach my students that make starting a new piece so much easier. Honestly, I wish I'd known these things myself much earlier. That way, you can enjoy the learning process and actually see progress without burning out. The first thing to do is prioritize problem solving. Make your practice time count by zooming in on what actually needs work. When you get a new piece, you're usually gung-ho. It's something fresh to work on, maybe something you've always wanted to play. Hopefully you've listened to a few recordings, ideally more than one, and you have a sense of how it goes. Then you sit down at the piano and you're ready to dig in and start learning. But here's the thing. Some parts of the piece will be easier and some will be much, much harder. So don't treat it like a book that you read straight through from beginning to end. That's not how efficient practicing works. The way we prepare a piece at the piano is actually quite different from how we listen to it. When you're practicing, instead of always starting at the beginning and working your way straight through, start by focusing on the hardest spots. When you sit down to practice, begin with those sections and work on them first. When you're practicing, there should always be a feeling of challenge. If it feels generally quite easy, or if everything feels overwhelmingly hard and effortful, then you're not gauging the level of challenge quite right. What you want is a feeling of challenge and even slight discomfort, because what you're doing is confronting the parts that need work and then actually working on them. That feeling of mild discomfort is a sign that you're learning. Along with that feeling of challenge, you also want to feel like you're problem solving, where you're identifying a problem and figuring out what kind of work it needs. Identify the section and then identify what the work is going to be. For example, do you need to work out fingering? Do you need to figure out how to move your hand more efficiently from one place to the next? Do you need to work on coordination between the hands? Or do you just need to figure out the notes better? When you're in the early stages of working on a piece, whatever the challenge is, problem solve and then drill it several times to make it stick. I usually recommend doing 6 to 7 correct repetitions in a row, and then once you can play that little spot accurately and consistently, put it back into context. Start a little bit before the spot and then work into the spot and through it into the place after it. Let me show you an example of how that might play out in real life. I'm going to have a look here at a piece out of this J. McGraw Level 9 book of Masterwork Classics. Let's have a look at the Haydn Sonata in C major, Hoboken 1635. And it starts off quite easy. So I don't really need to practice that part as much as some of the other stuff that's going to come later. This piece has some 3 against 4 that might be a little tricky. And it also has quite a few turns. So I'm going to look in measure 20 at the fact we have, right? So that turn, 4 notes in the right hand, 1 note in 3 notes in the left hand, is going to be something I'm going to want to look at earlier than just the very beginning. Some people struggle with 4 against 3 and they go something like that kind of thing. So if that is you, then just practice that, practicing that together. I actually did make a video about how to play 4 against 3. I'll put a little card up there if you want to check that out. So then after you practice this a few times, let's say since this is rhythm, repeats over and over, maybe I just focus on this one. I do it several times in a row. Again and again and so forth. I might repeat that 6 or 7 times. Then I start a little bit before it and then I stop. That's hard to stop. You have to have some discipline to stop. Then go back to the beginning of that bar and then repeat that and then so forth. So you do the repetitions and you work on making as many correct repetitions in a row as you can. And then once you have that spot, you look for other tricky spots in the piece and learn those. Then when you work on the whole piece, you've already kind of pre-learned the most difficult parts. And that will accelerate your learning process and make it more enjoyable. This is a much more productive way to practice than just starting at the beginning, playing through the piece and hoping for the best. If you keep playing through it over and over and making the same mistakes in the same places, you're going to be practicing in mistakes, and then you won't be teaching yourself to focus on the spots that actually need attention. Next, let's talk about how important it is to learn the fingering and the notes at the same time. Playing the piano, or really any musical instrument, is a lot more like being an athlete than most people realize. We might be sitting still at the instrument, especially compared to something like a basketball player, but the motions we're using are incredibly precise. And just like in sports, we need to train those motions to be consistent. If you think about a basketball player practicing layups, they're not just doing it once or twice. Even really experienced players keep practicing their layups over and over again for years. They're training their muscle memory so they can do it under pressure and in all kinds of situations. They're not doing it differently every time. They're teaching their body how it feels to get it right and how to repeat that feeling. At the piano, it's the same idea. When we're learning a new piece, it's really tempting to just focus on the notes. You might find yourself thinking, okay, as long as I'm playing the right notes, it really doesn't matter what fingering I use. Or you might think, I'll figure out the fingering later after I've learned the notes. But that actually sets you up for more work later. Don't do that. Start by learning the notes and the fingering at the same time. There are a lot of really good editions out there, and by the way, I do not recommend just downloading some random version of the piece you're playing. Find a good edited version, even if you have to pay something for it, because editors will often include helpful fingering that you can use as a starting point. Now, that doesn't mean you have to use the fingering exactly as written, but printed fingering is usually based on common sense conventions that make the music lie better under the hand and that can help you learn the piece more efficiently from the beginning. When you're in the early stages of learning a new piece, it's super important to pick fingerings and write them into the music. That doesn't mean you can't change your mind ever. It's just that it's much better to choose fingerings early on. Practice with those fingerings as you learn the notes. If you want to change your mind, that's fine, but just be sure you update the score to reflect what you're actually doing. And the reason for that is because it's really important to have a clear connection between the fingering you see on the page and the finger that you actually use. So if you see a 2 and you're playing a 2, that helps train your brain to recognize that combination. You'd be surprised. Even advanced players sometimes don't have an awareness of the finger number they're playing compared with the fingering that they think they're playing. And so you might ask them, what finger are you playing? And they'll say, I'm playing a 3 there, but then in actuality, they're using their second finger. And you might think, well, if they're an advanced player, why does that even matter? But it matters because even some advanced players take forever to learn the notes of their music. And part of why it takes so long is because they're not using consistent fingerings and they're not really thinking about that coordination between the finger they're using and what they think they're using. So choose and write in fingering early in your learning process and keep that fingering updated to match what you actually do. Before we move on to the next point, I would love to take a moment to tell you about a new mini course I created called Piano Lit. It's been really well received so far, and I'm so excited to share it with you. Piano Lit is a 6-week self-guided course that introduces you to a wide variety of piano repertoire, and each week centers on a different theme with music that's chosen from across various style periods to fit that theme. Alongside the listening list, you'll find historical context and listening notes to help guide you on what to listen for. Everything, including performances of each piece, is embedded in each week's module. It's designed for musicians at any level who want to explore and deepen their understanding of piano literature. I'll go ahead and put a link to the page about the course in the description below this video if you want to check it out. Now I want to talk about how you can lay a strong foundation for yourself by practicing at a slow tempo. I know, this is a tip you hear a lot from a lot of different teachers, but it's so important that I wanted to be sure to talk about it today. The fact of the matter is, slow, correct practice sets you up for fast, confident playing. Here's the thing with fast practice. A lot of times when we start a new piece, it's supposed to go at a fast tempo and we can start to feel impatient with ourselves. That can lead to a kind of stress when you're working on it because you start thinking, I can't waste too much time practicing this slowly because this eventually has to go faster. And I get that. If you practice something that's meant to be fast at a really slow, plodding tempo, that can use a different technique. And so yes, you do need to be careful not to be stuck in a slow version that doesn't match the final motion or feel of the piece. And in fact, I made a video about how you shouldn't do slow practice wrong, and I'll put that in the description below this video, and I'll probably put a card up there too so you can click over to that. But that's not exactly what I mean when I talk about playing too fast too soon. I'm talking about trying to go fast before you really even know the notes. You push yourself to play it quickly, but you're not ready, and that leads to this kind of stammering practice where you play a few notes, you correct yourself, and then you keep going. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to take an example. Let's see. I'm going to use a prelude from Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier. I want to look at the third prelude from Book 1, which goes like this, etc. It's fast. And so what can happen when you start this piece is like maybe you're starting to learn the notes and you're like, okay, this is really just broken chords and patterns. And so you go a little faster than you're ready. And this is what that stammering practice sounds like. Let's see if I can do it. See what I'm talking about? Actually, you can't see this, but Tucker, my puppers, is asleep here underneath the piano. And when I was doing that practice, he like sat up and was like, what is happening? Okay, the thing about that stammering practice is it is something that you sometimes might not even be aware you're doing because that is accompanied by a turning off of the ears and the listening process because you're so focused on like, okay, what's next, because you're playing faster than you really can. That is the reason that starting and doing that slow practice with many correct repetitions before you speed the thing up is a much better way to lay a foundation when you're starting a new piece. Earlier in this video, I was talking about how having a little bit of that feeling of discomfort is a sign that we're learning. Doing something where it's just one note at a time, disembodied from all the notes around it, will not be a good use of your time. So we want to find the balance between way too fast, that kind of thing, and so you need to find the right level of challenge for yourself and work from there. So if you catch yourself kind of stammering through something, that's a sign that you're going faster than you're ready for. Divide the piece up into smaller sections and work on them one at a time. Like for example, in this case, I would probably work on the first 8 measures as one unit, and then I would divide it, I'd probably work on the next 8 measures as one unit. Some parts are easier than others. The first bar is slightly more complicated, and then these are pretty easy. But then this measure 6 is a little harder. So I would probably be focusing on those measures, those spots, and not just go over and over the same 8 bars without any differentiation or awareness of what is easier and what is more challenging and needing more repetitions. And one important thing to keep in mind, when you're doing repetitions, you need to pause just a little bit between each one. That gives your brain time to process. Even just a couple of seconds between repetitions will help you learn it more efficiently so that you're not just doing what that stammery kind of playing was, where you just play and play and play and play without any reflection in between. Listen in your own practicing for that stammery kind of practice. If you hear it, that's the sign that you're going too fast too soon. Even when you're really excited about a new piece that ultimately needs to go fast, Take your time. Lay the groundwork first. Earlier in this video, I talked about slow practice. I've made a few videos about slow practice. If you want a deeper dive into exactly how to do it, what I suggest and teach my students, check out that video right up there in the corner where I will walk you through some practical, actionable strategies. If you found this video helpful, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who might find it useful too. It really helps me reach more pianists like you. I'll see you in the next video. Happy practicing!